Hey everybody, this is Alireza from Zafre, and today we're going to be building a 3D logo only using a JPEG file, a spline, and Webflow. So let's get started. First we're going to get into our basic spline project. We're going to be deleting the basic mesh, and we're going to be importing our own JPEG file or PNG by just dragging it and dropping it into our spline project. Then we're going to be using the pen tool on top to add some dots around our logo so that we can actually carve out the logo from the JPEG and basically get it out of its background. However, we have to make sure that we place these dots correctly on the edges so that we don't run into any issues later on. If you don't place them correctly, you might get some stairway effects on the edges. Once we've finished placing all of our dots around them, and keep in mind you can use less dots if your project logo looks a lot simpler. We can just click on them or just drag them using shift and make them rounder. So here we can use the corner property to make some of our rough edges look a lot more rounder and nicer. And this is only needed if you need those round edges. If you want them to be sharp, then don't do this part. You can just skip this part. So we're making some of our edges much rounder by changing the corner property to 200, for example. We can keep this going until our logo looks as we want it to. Okay, now it's looking pretty good. And as we can see in the final project, we're going to have it so that it responds to the user mouse or touch. And in order to do that, we need to be using extortion to give it an actual 3D look. As you can see on the Z index, on the Z axis, it doesn't have any width, but we can change that with the extortion property and give it a 3D look. So it doesn't look like a 2D object, it looks like a 3D object. Now we need to actually control it and make it respond to the mouse movement or the user touch movement on their screen. In order to do that, we can just come over here to the events and choose the option look at. Once we do that, we can test it and see that it's working. But it's not working as much as we wanted to. It's not as responsive as we like it to be. So we can change the plain disk property to something much smaller. Now if you move our mouse, it's gonna look and move a lot more fluidly, and it's gonna move a lot more faster and be more responsive in general. And we can even change the damping to make it so that it has more easing, so it doesn't immediately go from one look to another. See, it's got a lot more easing to it. It's almost like we added a transition to it. And if you want it to be slower, you can increase the damping even further. Now we want to make sure that it's actually responding to our mouse movement based on the actual center of the object rather than responding based on the top left of it. We do that by using the group object. We simply add it, and then we add the same event after removing it from our previous our first shape. We add the same properties, 200 plain disk and 15 damping, and now it's responding to the actual center of it. It's changing and rotating based on the center of the object, not on the top left of it. Once we've done this, we can add some camera to it, one camera, and we can give it some states. We can, for example, give it a base state and then a tablet state and then a mobile state. These states can be used to make sure that depending on what size our user's screen is and what screen they're using, we can zoom the camera in and out and change it. This way it's going to make it look like our object is zooming in or zooming out. It's going to change its size essentially. But we're only in reality just changing the actual camera zooming. We're not actually changing the object itself. And we can set it to be like 190% for the mobile. As you can see, it's not working because we're not actually applying any of the changes we made. Like, yes, we have created those states, but we're not actually using them. Like, see, if we go lower, it doesn't change. In order to make sure that it actually changes depending on the user's screen, the screen size, we can use the events and look for a screen resize. This is going to make it so that our project's going to change its camera state depending on the device that the user is using. So as we can see for mobile, we can make it so that it goes from the current state to the mobile state, and there's no easing needed, so we can just set this one to 0. And as for tablet, we can do the same thing, but this time we're going to be using the tablet state. Then we can close it, and now it should be working. Now if we just reduce our size, we can see that it is actually responding. Here's for tablet and here's for mobile. Once we've done that, we can change it a little bit for our tablet so it looks a little bit better. Let's set it to 220 for example. You can change this as you want for your own project, as however you see it fit. But basically it's just gonna get smaller depending on the screen size, and it's gonna grow larger if the user is using a desktop, like a laptop or a computer. So now as you can see, the user is able to drag our logo like this using the controls which are the default in Spline, but we don't want these default options, we want to disable them. So how do we make it so that it only responds to the mouse movement but doesn't allow the user to actually control it like that? So we can go to the export and go to viewer, then we can scroll down in the play section, and here we can see some properties that we want to disable. We're going to disable the orbit controls, the pan, and the zoom. This means that when the user scrolls down, it's not going to zoom out or zoom in our object. We're going to change some of these settings even more so that it only actually responds to the user touch and mouse movement. And we're going to make it so that on the touch, as for example mobile or tablet, the user can scroll. User can scroll, so in order to do that we set it to no for the page scroll. Then here we can change it so that it's using the actual global window instead of just the canvas, which means that if you have, for example, more objects and more HTML elements on your web page, it's not going to affect it, and it's going to be using every part of the window to detect where the user's mouse is or where their touch is, and then it's going to change it's going to rotate our object accordingly. Here we can change the directional light, which is a default light that we have. We can also add other lights, for example point light or spotlight would work well here, and you can just drag these and use the spline options here to change them and make them look how you want them to. So here we can just play around with some of these properties, make our spotlight look a bit better so that it's like projecting the light from the top, and it's going to make it easier to see our object, and it's going to make it look more realistic. Here we have the finished project once we have all of our lights and everything set up perfectly, and we're just going to update the viewer so that we have the final project ready, and we're going to copy the URL afterwards so that we can use it in our Webflow. Here we're going to switch over to our Webflow project, which is just basically a basic Webflow. We have just one section, and we're going to be adding an element to it, and it's going to be the spline scene. We're going to add it by dragging it right here. We just have to copy and paste our URL which we got from Spline. Once we do that, we can start using it in our Webflow project. So here we're going to paste it, and the cool thing is that we can actually see it in our preview section. We don't have to publish it, we can just see it and change it right here, which is fantastic. We are also going to give it a position absolute, so it doesn't actually affect other elements on our page. Of course you can make it so that it does, but in this case we don't want it to. We want it to be looking at something that's in the background, for example. We're going to give it a width of 100% and a height of 100 view height, so it's taking up the whole page. And as we can see, it is actually responsive and it is changing its size, or rather the camera is zooming in and zooming out depending on the current size. And once we publish the page, just so we make sure we test it and it's working properly, we can use the Webflow link and test it. So here it is, the object has loaded and it's responding to the user mouse movement. And if we use the inspect, we can change it to mobile, and as you can see, it is working for different mobile sizes and tablet sizes as well. And on desktop, of course, we already checked that it is working. So yeah, that's it for this one. See you guys in the next video.